Welcome to the Inspired Performance Podcast, where equine experts Jillian Kreinbring and Casey Jones discuss topics like dynamic posture, bodywork, movement patterns, and other concepts that your horse definitely wants you to know about. Today's episode is packed with insights about ethical and physical considerations to equine bodywork, addressing performance horses versus leisure horses. Can horses receive too much bodywork? And finally, empowering owners with education so that they can better advocate for their horses. Enjoy!
You're going to go work on a horse's body that you know is most likely going to be sore from the way that that horse is being trained, because it's being moved in a way that works against its mechanism. So how do you handle that?
Ethically or physically?
Physically, both.
Ethically and physically. Ethically, I think about who the people are and if they're using the horse just as a straight tool, because then I won't work on the horse. But because I think this particular client are trying to do good within their industry and make changes, I'm willing to stick with them for that purpose, for ethical reasons. But in this case, I don't take away the horse's all of its complete body compensations. I'm only taking away its painful disorders. So I'm only taking away his pain points, but I'm not changing their entire structure because of that.
So if you went and made major changes to the body, let's say you freed up,
like if I reset the whole spinal system and I didn't no liver flushes, no detoxing, no food changes, nothing that. All I'm doing for these particular horses today is taking away their pain because they just came off showing last week and they had a long haul home, so they're calling me out because they noticed their horses were sore when they got home.
Okay, so basically you're going to go make them comfortable.
That's it.
And try to release some pain.
Mm-hmm. So they can go back
either from hauling or, being in a different stall, being on a 7-day circuit or whatever it is.
Correct.
But you're not really necessarily looking to
change their way of being,
because they're going to go right back into that job.
Correct.
That's fair.
So I make that choice, and and that's kind of like your God choice in that sense. Like if someone wanted to recreate and they were going to do this, I do more with their spines. I check their spines, I see where they're at, so I know where they're at, but I don't necessarily push their bodies through a full system.
So do you notice a big difference on how you work with performance horses versus an owner that has a horse that rides them for leisure and for fun, or maybe they're learning, they do clinics and so forth? Do you typically have a different approach just because those two owners have completely different goals?
Yes, I do.
You have more leeway with the more, I want to say, layman person who isn't necessarily being driven by a competitive agenda?
Not necessarily. Your competitive person could absolutely want the best for their horse, so they're at premium performance. They can want their eyes, teeth, feet, everything, skin, max body condition, blah blah blah. They may want to spend max amount for that and do that, and then you have your leisure person that just can't afford it, so they can take them through their normal body work or routine, infrequently, and then okay, well I'll get to teeth later. But we know that that's a huge catalyst for body work, right? The TMJ and the system. So, but you can't say, but then you have a performance person that gets performance floats that wants it, but then they do double dentistry. They get multiple body workers all month. Some people overdo. So on the horse, people
So say more about that. I find that interesting. What do you mean by a horse gets over quote unquote body work?
Over body worked. Because the system has to, reboot itself.
The horse's system.
The horse's system has to reboot itself. So let's say if I have acupuncture done, as an osteopath, I can tell that the pattern doesn't fit what it's supposed to fit. So I can kind of still feel acupuncture in the system up to 3 weeks. So there's no point in me doing osteopathy on top of that, because all I'm doing is the system is working itself out, the horse's system, and I just gave it a really big impact, did a full mobilization of the whole body, and I just confused the body again. So therefore I dropped its immune system back down.
Interesting.
So I don't want to take my horse's immunity up and down so frequently with so much body work. So you need some recovery point.
See, I find this really interesting because having spent a lot of time with you and with when you go and do body work on horses, or just spending time with various types of body workers, it seems that owners oftentimes are almost looking for the things that are wrong for their horses, or the things that are wrong with their horses, so that the body worker has to come fix something, as opposed to seeing the body worker as a preventative to certain things that may occur a little bit further down the road.
It's true.
Like, so I've seen you several times go to do either myofascial release, trigger point therapy, structural trim, or an osteopathic treatment, and you not really find that much in the body, and the owner's actually somewhat disappointed.
I know. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
And they're always like, and what about this? I feel this. And a lot of that is training. They feel it because their horse isn't in a good posture, or it's not moving well. But that's the mechanics of how that horse is being ridden.
But it's not the actual structure
Not
that has
right. Over time, the structure breaks down. But if I keep it mobile and moving, then your job is to
move it
correctly. You know, I can only move it so far, and then after a while, I've got bone compensation because we've been moving in a crappy habitual pattern. You know, like that's when I start having arthritis. That's when I can't move through my knees and do that. So then you are limited by what you can train in your horse.
Very interesting.
But yeah, I mean, it's not you don't want to have to do it that much, especially you might have to in the beginning. You might have to for a trauma, but
you might have to do osteopathy or some form of body work
a little more frequently. I mean, look at you. You were good after one session, and I needed 2 follow-ups to do my liver. And look at that. That was a very big difference.
Oh, you mean in our own osteopathic treatments? Yeah.
You know, that's what our bodies presented.
So do you ever have a time when you are doing body work that's they're almost like, I hesitate to say this word because I know equine practitioners can get into trouble, but there are times when you're doing a form of body work that's more medical in nature. Like if you think about humans, they can get a medical massage where it's actually addressing a certain muscle that's causing a problem. Or you can get a feel-good massage. So is that just dependent on the client as to what type of a session that you provide? Do you ever have bodywork sessions that are just there for the sheer enjoyment or pleasure for the horse, as in, wow, I had a really stressful week, I need to go get a massage because it feels good?
Yes, you can get just like let's say if you wanted to do a nice easy equine touch or a T-touch or something that's more just soothing, sympathetic, relaxed. Because, you know, sometimes within osteopathy, it can be jolting for the moment, and then you wait for the system to reset. But we are resetting a system, so that is a different form of body movement. You know, myofascial release. There are things where we're just doing energetic or fascial release. Those are very sympathetic. Cranial sacral. Look how non-invasive cranial sacral is, but then how much you're impacting in the body at the same time. Does your average client know what you're actually doing when your hands are on your horse? I don't think people know the difference between me doing a fascial release, me holding, and me doing equine touch, or me doing something else. I don't think the average person is educated enough to know the different types of touches.
So how do you help your clients? How do you empower your clients in terms of education so that they actually know what their body workers are doing, that they can essentially advocate for the horses by being able to ask the right questions and be discerning about what it is that they're looking for horses, as opposed to just going with the flow?
So 4 questions.
It's probably about 5 questions.
5 questions?
Sure, why not?
Well, first off, saddle fitting's an easy one. I can show people how I can make their horse's back sore by really pressing in on that sympathetic border trunk line and saying, I can make your horse look sore and I can make it not look sore. So you can teach people tricks to, kind of like when you grab that fifth cervical and look, your horse really pushes off of that and he's always very responsive. But what are you doing?
Just triggering a reflex.
You're triggering a reflex. So how can a body worker manipulate you by triggering a reflex? Because they've learned reflexology in some form or fashion within their body work. To say, oh, look, it's really painful because it has a reflex. But is it a painful reflex or is it just reflexing?
Right.
So I do try to help people with that, especially with saddle fitting, because I think that saddle fitters do that a lot to see,
to prove a point.
And I think that that's a false sales point.
You can learn more about Jillian Kreinbring and Casey Jones by visiting horseworldconnect.com, JillianKreinbringInspired.com, and CaseyMJones.com.